What's up, everybody? This is the Collector here with Image Collect. With the release of Marvel's Spider-Man Homecoming, I thought we would review the 3 different Spider-Man franchises we've now had over the last 15 years. Here it goes. In 2002, Sony Pictures first introduced us to Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man in the self-titled movie. This was an origin story about a young, awkward, nerdy teenage boy named Peter Parker, who's accidentally bitten by a radioactive spider and develops super spider-like powers. The film and the 2 sequels that followed were directed by Sam Raimi, most known for the 1980s horror classic The Evil Dead. Orphaned as a child, Peter Parker is raised by and lives with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, portrayed by actors Rosemary Harris and Cliff Robertson. As if being a nerdy teenager with glasses that gets bullied isn't enough, Peter is also in love with a neighborhood girl named Mary Jane Watson. Kirsten Dunst played this classic popular girl that the nerd boy falls for, only her nerd boy is also a soon-to-be superhero. Peter does have one friend, who may be rich and handsome, but is an outcast, very much like Peter himself. James Franco used his talented acting chops and dashing white smile to give life to Peter's best friend, Harry Osborn. When tragedy strikes and Uncle Ben is killed, Peter takes his powerful advice and decides to use Spider-Man for the greater good. As he struggles with jobs after high school, he both delivers pizza and sells photos of Spider-Man to Jay, the one Jonah James, played by J.K. Simmons, who is the editor and publisher of The Daily Bugle, New York's leading muckraking tabloid. If only there had been a selfie stick back then. As if life wasn't hard enough being Peter Parker and Spider-Man, Peter had to balance taking amazing photos of himself as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and now battling the Green Goblin. Norman Osborn, eloquently played by Willem Dafoe, head of Oscorp and father of Peter's best friend Harry, is exposed to an experimental formula that drives him insane and creates the evil split personality that is the Green Goblin. When Spider-Man defeats the Green Goblin, Harry Osborn realizes he must seek revenge to avenge his father's tragic death. The cast comes back with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man in Spider-Man 2. Love and friendship, longing for the parents he never knew, wishing to continue adhering to his Uncle Ben's word of advice, and trying to keep everyone safe, Peter Parker is now plagued by a failing personal life. Bestie, Harry Osborn, isn't making it any easier now that he's the new Goblin, convinced Peter and Spider-Man are one and the same, and determined to make him pay for the death of his father. But this isn't even enough trouble for Peter. A new villain, Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina, is now also after Spider-Man, much thanks to his complicated friendship with Harry. Spider-Man 2 is arguably still considered to be the best Spider-Man movie. It is also considered to be one of the best superhero movies, though when it was released in 2004, it still had much less competition, especially since the Marvel Cinematic Universe had not yet been created. On the other hand, Spider-Man 3, released in 2007, has been regarded as the least favorite of the trilogy, having managed to piece together the broken parts of his life and finding a balance between his relationship with Mary Jane and his responsibility as Spider-Man, challenges continue to arise. Will he and Mary Jane live happily ever after? Peter finds the true killer of his Uncle Ben, Flint Marko, who has been transformed into one of his toughest foes yet, the Sandman. Flint Marko is played by Thomas Hayden Church, and is without a doubt the highlight of the entire movie. But once again, Peter finds himself troubled as his Spider-Man suit turns black, and Eddie Brock takes over his job at the Daily Bugle, taking photos of the beloved city superhero. As Peter's dark side comes out, we're introduced to Venom, who happens to also be Eddie Brock in a sort of Alice through the looking glass sort of world, and Spider-Man must now defeat his darker self. That 70s show star Topher Grace takes on the role of the dark side of Spider-Man. Peter Parker's best friend turned enemy, Spider-Man's dark side, and the villain who took away his Uncle Ben does have one bright light, as Bryce Dallas Howard is the redheaded Gwen Stacy. Though, in Spider-Man 3, she's seemingly nothing more than a pawn to make both Eddie Brock and Mary Jane jealous, because in this trilogy, Peter lives happily ever after with Mary Jane Watson. Sorry, spoiler alert, Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man in 3 movies over the course of 5 years. He is the first and will always have a special place for our first. But then, along came another spider. 5 years after the box office failure of Spider-Man 3, Sony Pictures decided to give it another go with The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012. This time, Peter Parker was played by Andrew Garfield, who was still a rather unknown actor at the time, unlike Tobey Maguire, who had quite a few movies under his belt before being cast as Peter Parker. Rather than another love story with Mary Jane and the on-again, off-again friendship with Harry Osborn, The Amazing Spider-Man falls for Gwen Stacy, played by Emma Stone. In The Amazing Spider-Man, Uncle Ben is briefly played by Martin Sheen, before meeting the tragic fate that sets Peter Parker and his Spider-Man alter ego on his noble path. Aunt May was the well-loved Sally Field. The Amazing Spider-Man is more concerned with discovering what happened to his parents than just fighting neighborhood crime. This leads Peter directly to yet another doctor at the Oscorp lab, Dr. Kurt Connor, who is his father's former partner, and when Peter discovers he may be connected to his parents' death, Spider-Man is on a collision course headed straight for Dr. Connor's alter ego, the Lizard. Rhys Ifans plays Dr. Connor's the Lizard. This series also introduces us to a young Peter Parker. Max Charles plays the young Peter before he was orphaned to live with his aunt and uncle. The Amazing Spider-Man wasn't a hit, but it wasn't an entire miss either. So Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy returned for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014. This film goes back to the roots of Spider-Man and his internal battle between the ordinary obligations of Peter, spending time with Gwen, and the great responsibilities of Spider-Man to protect New York. The Amazing Spider-Man also brings back a more hipster Harry Osborn and the Green Goblin, this time played by Dane DeHaan. As if battling his old friend, the Green Goblin, wasn't enough, Spider-Man must also take on an enemy much stronger than himself, as the nerdy Spider-Man fan turned electric villain, Electro, played by Jamie Foxx, is a fan no more. The Amazing Spider-Man sparked a real-life love connection between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, but the series didn't spark quite as much as the original Tobey Maguire series did. It was time for Marvel Studios to step in and bring us the Spider-Man we've all longed for. By 2005, Marvel Entertainment realized that they wanted to produce their own films independently to feature and do what they wanted with Marvel characters. So they created the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU. The first feature film under the MCU was Iron Man in 2008. By 2016, the MCU was at its height, and Sony Pictures decided to bring Spider-Man into the world again, this time with the help of those who originally created him. Tom Holland made his first, albeit minor, appearance in 2016's Captain America: Civil War, where the Avengers turn against one another. Unlike the previous two Peter Parker actors, Tom Holland fit the age. Both Maguire and Garfield were in their upper 20s when they played the teenage Peter Parker. Holland, on the other hand, is currently 21 and definitely still looks the part to accurately play a 15-year-old boy. Captain America: Civil War also introduced the new Aunt May, this time only referred to as May, and played by the much younger actress Marissa Tomei. One thing that Marvel was successfully able to bring to this new Spider-Man was an authenticity to the original comic book character. Longtime Spidey fans may recognize specific scenes in the movies from some beloved parts of the comics, while fans may not see the stereotypical Mary Jane, though rumor has it Zendaya plays MJ in secret. After all, her friends call her MJ. His love interest isn't even Gwen Stacy, but the talented Laurie Harrier as Liz, Peter Parker's high school crush and eventual homecoming date. There is no Harry Osborn in Peter's group of academic decathlon friends, but many of the names are recognizable from the comic book universe, such as his best friend Ned, played by Jacob Batalon. At no point is Peter bitten by a radioactive spider. Uncle Ben is already gone. This is not an origin story, as we already know that Peter has become Spider-Man and is working with Tony Stark, probably one of the most successful things that Marvel's stewardship was able to provide. Spider-Man is already immersed into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and interacts with other characters, so the audience feels like they already know Spider-Man and his world. Plus, Who doesn't love seeing Robert Downey Jr. as both Tony Stark and Iron Man alike? We also see Gwyneth Paltrow return as Pepper Potts, and Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan, with some comedic appearances by Chris Evans as Captain America. The evil villain is one that many people can relate to in the iconic Vulture, played by Michael Keaton. Vulture is just an average man working hard to take care of his family, but when he feels like the superheroes that everyone admires are just profiting from their own destruction of his world, he takes matters into his own hands and steals from the rich to give to his crew. If Robin Hood was a hero, perhaps Vulture could be one too. Spider-Man may be the hero of Homecoming, but it came after some fatherly help from Iron Man. This is not unlike Sony Pictures receiving the much-needed and successful fatherly advice from the creators themselves at Marvel, who were finally able to create the Spider-Man that moviegoers have longed for. Is Tom Holland's Spider-Man here to stay? Well, we'll see him again in the long-awaited 2018 Avengers Infinity War, and in 2019 with a still untitled Spider-Man Homecoming sequel. While many have voiced Spider-Man in animated series, I wanted to give a shout out to Drake Bell, who played the Peter Parker-inspired Rick Riker in 2008's superhero movie, a comedy spoof on superhero films. However, he also went on to voice Peter Parker/Spider-Man in 2012's The Ultimate Spider-Man animated series for the last 5 years and counting. Only time will tell which Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire or Tom Holland, sorry Andrew Garfield, will remain number one. Then again, we've been introduced to many different actors as Batman, and everyone has a different favorite, so perhaps, depending on who you ask, you'll get a different "Who is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?" One thing is for certain, Cliff Robertson has still brought us the most iconic Uncle Ben when he told Peter, "Remember, with great power comes great responsibility." Well, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has proved that they know how to be responsible with their power. So thank you for saving Spider-Man. Hey everybody, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me on this collection of Spider-Man cinematic history. This is The Collector, and I'll be back soon with some more photos and fun facts for y'all. Have a Spidey day, and stay golden.